honor for us to be starting this conference. I'm Nana Koch. I'm going to be your moderator for today. Before we start, actually, I want to say this presentation is graciously being funded by the Marian Chace Foundation. It's being funded, and it's specifically for archival purposes, and it will be available at some time in the future. And this presentation is about the future, so you'll see us soon. I want to introduce you to 7 extraordinary women who I have had the incredible experience of working with since January, and we've been working tirelessly to put together a presentation that will help everyone understand where we were, where we are, and where we're going. So our history holders and our history makers in front of you, and I think that they all deserve an incredible applause. And you will hear them continuously throughout the presentation speaking about the 8 icons who started us on this path. So as they speak, they'll be referring to the wonderful women who came before us. Now I'm going to turn this over to Marcia Leventhal, who will give you lots of information in the introduction to this presentation.
Greeting, old friends, new people to the profession, people that have been here almost as long as we have, but not quite. We are so pleased to be with you today, really pleased, because we're still standing, more or less. Continuity and change as we contemplate the existential conundrum, forever pondered by verbally articulate humankind. Who am I? How am I? Where am I now? Throughout our unfolding lives, as our trajectory or narrative may change and develop, these concerns shape our development in profound ways. Because we, this group of presenters, have been a part of a developing profession which by the very nature of its essence, its elements, has allowed us, and in turn, each of you who have followed, continue the flow, so to speak, not to use a living metaphor, but to use one, to evolve and unfold into realms only dreamt of in previous eras. And so a brief revisit into not only the visions of our icons, but to the foundations, elements, building blocks, which turned a dream, a hope, a belief in change and healing, stimulated and facilitated by a kind of evolving, creative, expressed action called or named dance, has led us to have created this, may I say, amazing profession, dance movement therapy. And how you, all of you, with these elements, may now move it into its further evolution, knowing from whence we came, can only support us as we continue to develop, change, enhance, and release. Continuity supports us, and change offers us hope and health. So, dear friends, we offer you icons, issues, and innovations in the creation of the American Dance Therapy Association as we support each and every one of you, all of us, as we move forward into the future. I would like to read you 2 quotes, and then we're going to move a little bit before we get into the nitty-gritty of what we're doing today. This is a quote from Agnes DeMille, the great choreographer who was not a dance therapist. And she said, "To dance is to be out of yourself, larger, more beautiful, more powerful. This is power. It is glory on earth, and it is yours for the taking." And from Alan Watts, who wasn't a dancer, he was a philosopher. And Alan Watts said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." So, with those few words, I'm going to ask everyone to just move a little bit to get you into the kind of frame that we're presenting today and to share that with you. The creaking mic, it's a mystery. You'll see what happens next. I have in front of me an elastic, and of course elastic we say, well, it stretches. But I like to think when we say stretch, we're also talking about elongating, maybe reaching, maybe extending. It's something beyond the moment of stretch. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment. You could do it in your seat, or if you'd like to stand up, there's plenty of room in the aisles and right here. Take a moment to become present. I know you're here, your body is here, but many of you have come across oceans or continents. Some of you have traveled across several continents, and even if you've just come from Chicago, your head still needs to be here. So taking a moment, everybody please, to be in that space where you remember dance. And you, because the dance is what brought you to dance therapy. And if you take a moment to think of how you stretched into that reality, how you reached, how you extended towards you in the dance, what begins to happen? And that will bring you here and now into this space place. So for the next minute or two, would you just play with that in any way that's right for you? There's no right or wrong. Let your judge leave this building. That judge did not pay to be here. Extending, reaching, whatever it might mean for you, out beyond and back to your center, your core, which is opening in some way, allowing you, as it opens, another one of our brilliant paradoxes, as we open, we become present. And we become present to the dance in us, the dance that brought us here, the dance that motivated us. And now I'm going to be still for about a minute while you explore that in your own way, in your own time. There is no right or wrong. Just about a minute to play with that. And as you're moving, perhaps there's that aha moment where you say, oh yes, now I remember the joy, the exploration, the feeling that I had when I began to dance. And maybe it's something else, that's okay. Remembering that, knowing that it's going to be with you today as we begin to explore how our icons came to this amazing profession, as did we through dance. So now taking another maybe 30 seconds to finish your exploration, and very gradually, in your own time, in your own way, bringing it back to that alive, still place where you feel the energetic flow moving through you. You don't even have to put it into words, remembering, focusing, becoming present to here and now, to you the dancer, to you the dance therapist. Whatever it might mean for you, just taking that moment to be with your experience. Thank you. Our profession was created a long time ago. Dance is the oldest form. of psychotherapy known to humankind. People danced to celebrate births, to prepare for the hunt, to experience the joys and the sorrows of everyday life. The roots of dance therapy, of course, begin with this ancient practice, which is thousands of years old. We didn't create and develop or discover dance therapy. But it is the oldest form of therapeutic intervention known to humankind. It has been, and it still is, a tool used by ancient priests, shamans, medicine men, and medicine women around the world. The Greeks used it to achieve states of ecstasy and abandonment, not unlike modern theory and the uses of catharsis. Dance was how the ancient human being made sense of their world, and especially when words weren't potent enough to describe what was happening. Isadora Duncan, one of our early pioneers in dance and self-expression, she said, "For me, the dance is not only the art that gives expression to the human soul through movement, but also the foundation of a complete conception of life, more free, more harmonious, more natural." And for Mary Wiegmann, another great modern dancer who brought dance into the expressive self, so that as one began to dance, they began to feel what they were moving, and it wasn't just positions. And she said the dance is not only an act of time and space, it is also the art of the consciously lived and fulfilled moment. All of our icons that we're going to be discussing today came from dance. Each of them discovered dance in their own way, how dance was something more than just performing. Performing wasn't enough. Teaching people to dance wasn't enough. Developing choreography for the sake of just being on the stage for the aesthetics of the choreography wasn't enough. And they knew there was something about the healing potential that brought people forward. And this is two beautiful quotes. Hopefully you can read them. One is from Baryshnikov, which is amazing. He said, "When a body moves, it is the most revealing thing. Dance for me a minute, and I'll tell you who you are." And I think you can all read this beautiful quote here. The beginnings with, "Sometimes I forget that I was created for joy." And it ends with the idea of something is contagious, that we might dance, and it is contagious. So now each of us is going to share a little bit about how we got to dance therapy through dance and how the icons stimulated us. We're each supposed to talk about a minute or two, so don't worry, it's not going to be too long. It's in alphabetical order, except because I was already standing, this amazing panel decided that L would not be in the alphabetical order. I would just start it, and then I'd sit down and I would shut up, and then we'd start with the alphabet. So just so you know, we actually know the alphabet sometimes.
Marcia, just let me say one thing. If you'll notice behind each person who will be speaking, we thought it was important for all of you to know the extraordinary service that they've done for dance therapy and for the association. So there'll be a slide for a record of service for each person speaking.
Thank you, Nana. We appreciate that. Nana's there to keep us on track and to give us the prompts that we need when some of us may forget. I call it COVID brain. Okay. I've been in dance my entire life. My first dance class was at age 3, and my first performance was at age 4. However, there was always a split between when I moved and jumped and rolled and sprung for joy. I was always expressing myself. I never saw a fence or a roof or a curb that I did not want to jump over, roll over, jump from, fly from. I was always moving. My body was so important to move and to express myself. At the same time, I was learning dance in the small towns that we moved to at different times during my parents' trek across the United States. And I think some of you probably remember the small town dance studios you studied. Tap, acrobatics, and ballet together. That was it. Until I reached a certain teacher in California who was part of the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. Mari Kashover was my first real ballet teacher, and that's where I learned discipline, strength, focus, showing up no matter what. And those are kind of skills and strengths that have put me through a lot in this world. I will always be grateful to those first experiences in ballet, which I studied with Mari for many, many years. However, it wasn't until I discovered jazz, Roland Dupre, Eugene Loring, some of these names might be familiar to you, Matt Maddox in New York, and then modern dance with Martha Graham, Merce Cunningham, and Gus Solomons Jr., that I really found my place in dance, and I was able to make the connection between the part of me that loved to move and felt the exploration and the experience and the spirit in my body. At the same time, I could put it into some kind of form which wasn't holding me back, like ballet was, though I learned a lot from ballet. And for me personally, and then I will be quiet, there was always 2 tracks in my life from my family, because my father almost died very early in my childhood. We were brought into the hospital to say goodbye to him, and he asked the children, there were 3 of us, he said, promise me one thing. He said, I won't be here to help you, but you promise me you will get your education, because that's the only thing people can't take from you. And people can take everything from you. And I knew that because there's immigrants in my family. I'm 3rd generation. So we know what it means to lose a country, to lose a home, to lose your family. Our generation, our people knew that, many generations of my people. So it was always, I must have my education. So for me, even though I was dancing, I became a professional dancer, actor, and so forth, I always had to get my education. So there was that two coming together at some point, and eventually I ended up meeting Dr. Alma Hawkins. When I was a student in high school, I ended up eventually doing a master's in dance, writing the first master's in dance therapy, which was the first non-choreographic thesis in the dance department at UCLA. And that started my whole life as a dance therapist, which goes back to 1965 when that thesis was produced. I'm the one that came from California. This whole group are East Coasters, and Southern but East Coast, and I come from California to New York. Hollywood, they used to say from Hollywood, yeah. So that's me, and eventually I became the director of graduate dance therapy program at NYU. And by the way, what I said about education, I had 3 tracks. I had my professional career, my education, and dance therapy, and I had to make decisions along the way, and it's taught me a tremendous amount when I work with my own clients, that sometimes our paths diverge, sometimes they split. It's never a wrong decision. It may take you on a path you didn't expect, and to trust the universe on some very profound level. So when I was hired by NYU, I had just been given to go to California in a new series, and everybody in that series became pretty famous, and I had chosen NYU. So I'm here now, and I'm so happy. And so that's about it. Later on, we're going to have questions and answers after there's a whole period of where you'll be moving. Now, back to the alphabet. It's my great pleasure to introduce my great friend for more than 50 years, Dr. Miriam Berger.
Thank you, Marcia. I began dance studies with tap dancing, and I had to be kept after class because I wasn't very good. I had to practice my time step. And then I studied with a disciple of Isadora Duncan, and we wore little yellow tunics and jumped over yellow scarves. And then when I was in elementary school, I was lucky enough to have Jane Dudley as my teacher. Some of you may know that name. And then I went to the new dance group where there were some wonderful, wonderful teachers, including Pearl Primus. And then at Bard College, my teacher was Jean Erdman, who had been a soloist with Martha Graham. And I wrote my senior project at Bard on dance therapy after working with Marian Chace at St. Elizabeth's in 1956. Count the years. I'm having a little trouble here. Jean became my mentor. I was a member of her company and ran her studio and produced her off-Broadway production of Finnegan's Wake. And I also performed and studied with Marian Chace and Mary Anthony, some other wonderful modern dancers, and studied again with Pearl Primus and her husband Percival Board, studied African Caribbean dance with them. And I'm very proud to say in 1960, I performed at the Newport Jazz Festival, accompanied by the great musicians Max Roach and Charlie Mingus. I hope you know who they were. That was a high point of my performing experience. And after work, I found Marian Chace, and after working with her at St. Elizabeth's in 1956, I also worked intensively with a dance therapist some of you may not know of, Rhoda Winter Russell, who had come from the University of Wisconsin, and I worked with her at Manhattan State Hospital and learned a great deal from her, perhaps more than with Marian Chace in my particular case. And then I worked extensively with Irmgard Bartenieff, and you'll hear about that later. So that, in a nutshell, is my dance experience and my dance therapy beginnings. And so now I'm very happy to introduce my very, very good friend for many, many years, Judith Bunney.
Thank you, Mimi. Hello, everybody. I see so many of my students. It's wonderful, and colleagues from years past. Wow. I, too, started dancing at the age of 3. My sister and I were enrolled in Miss Patricia's dance school in Denver, Colorado. We took ballet, tap, gymnastics, and indeed we did recitals from then on at the age of 4. Though my sister was older, she went on into theater and I stayed with dance. I took ballet during my adolescent years. In fact, I even took several years of Vaganova with a ballet master with a red cane, and it was applied to our bodies wherever we needed a little correction. And with that troupe, we performed Les Sylphides, but that wasn't sufficient because it was a little restrictive for me. So I later branched off into learning about modern. And I was very fortunate. I had wonderful teachers in DC, Pola Narinska, who had trained with Wigman, and Erika Timai, who also had trained with Wigman, but also Hanya Holm. I forgot to mention Pola Narinska also studied with Doris Humphrey. And then I had a few master classes with a man I loved, Eric Hawkins, which was really very, very challenging and wonderful. In 1957, I was hired as a dance therapist. I had that job description in 1957. It may have been the first one because Marian Chace, I believe, is still under the job description in the federal government as a rec therapy, because there wasn't a job description for dance therapy. I'll get to that when I speak about the legislation. So without any training whatsoever, right out of college, I was hired as a dance therapist at Chestnut Lodge, which many of you may know was a very famous psychoanalytic hospital. And so Marian Chace, I learned, worked there part-time. I mean, she was indefatigable. So I apprenticed with her from 1957 to 1963 at the lodge, following all of her groups. And because she had come from the Denishan heritage, I learned a new way of expressing myself and also learning about dance therapy. I think many of you, like I, had been a psychology major and training to be, in those days, in the late 50s, a rat psychologist. No, that wasn't my interest in research at all. So I jumped into the role of a dance therapist, and that was so fitting. And later, when we were forming the Dance Therapy Association, finding so many people who had that same parallel route with psychology, but yet we couldn't stay out of the dance studio. And it was just a track that we found, or found us, I'm not sure which. In my college years, I had written to Marian Chace. She was getting a lot of publicity in those days, and very cheekily asked her what I should study. She said anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, which was, for a psych major, pretty strange. So I did as she suggested. And in my kinesiology course, of course, I was all the jocks. So I gave them a ballet bar that I had learned. And unfortunately, I crippled them for about a weekend. They couldn't go up and down the stairs. So I learned a very hard lesson that way. But I also ended up with a bio minor with all that anatomy, kinesiology, and physiology, which was a very big help. So in those days, there was no formal training. We did apprenticeships, and that was my introduction to dance therapy. Following, learning, watching. And you have to forgive me, I have very poor eyesight at this point. It's now my pleasure to introduce my dear friend of 60 some odd years, Sharon Chaklin, who you all know, and she has been a driving force in this organization when it was just a dream to this day. Sharon.
So I will just say, yes, I danced when I was a child, but only by myself in my living room. And my parents did not send me to dance school. They sent me to piano lessons, and I was terrible. But so it was, when I was going to go to college, I was going to go for social work. I was going to be a social worker. And I went to Sarah Lawrence College and discovered they had a whole dance program, which in the 50s was quite unusual. And when I went there and I saw that they had a dance program, I took a class, and I took another one, and another one, and another one, auditing it until Bessie Schoenberg, who was teaching that, said, "You're doing a major, why don't you switch?" So instead of auditing and all, I became a dance major. And what was so important about the dance was, from being a freshman to a senior, so much happened to me through the dance, which is why I understood what dance therapy was about, because it was myself that I went through the process of change. My body, how I moved, what I expressed, all changed from the beginning to the end, the last 4 years. So that when I was ready to go into dance therapy, I understood. I didn't understand the structure of it until I went and studied later with Marian, but I understood what dance was about because I changed so deeply and grew so much through the experience of dance. And I'll just add, I kept dancing afterwards, and even in my 60s, I was dancing with Liz Lerner Dance Exchange. And that was wonderful. I could still keep doing that until I had to have a new hip, but oh well. And now I would like to introduce Beth Kalish.
Well, I started dance because my mother was a phys ed teacher and she always wanted to be a dancer. So guess who got the job? I was 3.5 years old when I was sent to dance school and haven't stopped yet. I performed at 4. I remember it was in a fire hall in Nashville, Tennessee, where I grew up. And this was in the 30s, the 1930s. And there was only one dance teacher in Nashville, and she was a Russian, very strict. She taught with a stick, a pole. She would walk around, and if you didn't get it right, she'd hit your foot. It was an ambivalent time, but my parents wanted me to dance, so I danced. It was a time of, what should I say, obedience in my life. That went on until I was in college. I danced 3 days a week, ballet, Russian dance, Spanish dance, toe, performed in Nashville and local venues with other people in my class. And it was quite fulfilling, but very demanding. Then I went to college, and I crossed the Mason-Dixon line for the first time and went to Sarah Lawrence College. And guess who was one of my classmates? Sharon. I was a performing arts major and a psychology major, both. And when I finished college, oh, by the way, in my junior year of college, I got married. And I think I was the first person to graduate from Sarah Lawrence College pregnant. A year later, I would drive from Philadelphia to New York for 3 days a week, take my classes, and drive back again. But when I was pregnant that spring, I would drive halfway, I'd get nauseous, get out of the car, throw up, get back in the car, and drive to Sarah Lawrence. It never occurred to me that there was anything unique about that at the time. It was the 1950s, and women were beginning to do a few things on their own. After my daughter was born in 1955, I started a dance class in my home in the basement. And one day I got a call from the chair of the Mental Health Association in Philadelphia inviting me to a lecture and a luncheon. And I went because I was kind of interested. And at the luncheon, he passed around little cards which said, "What are you interested in, and would you be willing to go and volunteer at a place called Philadelphia State Hospital?" Well, in those days, in the late 1950s, there were 8,000 chronic schizophrenics residential at Philadelphia State Hospital. It happened to be the hospital where they filmed The Snake Pit, by the way. I had never been there. But I wrote on this little card, well, I'm a dancer and a dance teacher, and psychology, I've had 4 years of psychology. I've always wanted to put them together, but I haven't the foggiest clue how to do that, and I don't feel capable of working with chronic schizophrenics, but thank you for the offer. At about 2 weeks later, he called me up and he said, "Would you be willing to just come and talk to us?" And I said, "Well, I don't really feel qualified." He said, "Well, okay, thanks, goodbye." About 2 months, he was very persistent. About 2 months later, I got a call from him again, and he said, I just got this article about a woman in Washington, D.C., who is doing something with chronic schizophrenics with dance, something called dance as communication. Are you interested? And I said, oh, yeah. So I wrote to Marian Chace, and she said, well, I'm teaching a course in June at the Turtle Bay Music School. Come and take the course. It was a 3-week course. And this was like 1958 or 59, I don't remember, somewhere back then. And there were about 13 of us. One was Claire Schmace, who became my dearest friend. And another one was Debbie Thomas from Wisconsin. And another one was Arlene Samuels. Those people I remember well because they're the ones who really became dance therapists later on. Anyway, it was 3 weeks, and we would learn in the morning, and in the afternoon we would go to hospitals all over New York. Hillsides Hospital, Albert Einstein. It was very grueling, and Marian was difficult. That's an understatement. She never told you what she wanted you to do or expected you to do. She was not really a good teacher. But when she would walk on the ward, it was like magic. People who were inpatients would talk to her and move with her and dance with her and relate to her. And I remember nights when Claire and I would talk about this. What is she doing? Why is this working? We don't understand. But we were trying to mirror her, do what she was doing, and it was rather challenging. But after 3 weeks, I went back to Philadelphia thinking, oh, I know how to do this. And I started calling around to hospitals and saying, I want to come and work with your patients. And they would say, would you like recreation dance? You can come on Saturday night. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to come and work with your patients and show them about movement and being in their bodies. And they would laugh, and that was usually the end. But the Institute of the Pennsylvania Hospital said, okay, we'll come. You can come 1 day a week and volunteer, which I did for about 6 months. And then I remembered this man at the Mental Health Association who had told me about Marian, and I thought, I'm going to get in touch with him. Maybe there's something better than 1 day a week. By that time, I had 2 children. I had a 4-year-old daughter, and I was teaching dance in my basement in the house. And my son was not interested at all. He was 2 at the time. And I called Robert Smuckler, and he said, come and talk to our board. Now, this was some couple of years after this initial meeting of his. I go to this meeting, and they say, well, what are you doing at the Institute? And I started to describe. I was working with mostly men at that time. There were a lot of men with post-traumatic stress disorder, which it was not called then. And the drugs were in, and people were either zombies or they were manicky. It was one way or the other. At any rate, I described what I was doing, and at one point, Robert Smuckler said, would you mind excusing us for about 15 or 20 minutes? So I went out of the room, and he came back and he said, would you come in again? We've just given you a grant, but you have to go work at Philadelphia State Hospital. They were going to give me a 1-year grant, which I took and went there for 1 year, and they were paying me 3 days a week. It was very interesting. They took me to the back wards where all of the denudative men were, and I think they thought they were going to scare me away. It didn't. I didn't know better. They would lock me in, and I would work with the men, and then I would leave with my little record player and move on. Well, to make a long story short, I ended up there, staying there 3 years, and was asked to write the grant for the state of Pennsylvania in order to hire people to do dance movement therapy in other places. So I feel very good that it was a beginning of something formal in the state of Pennsylvania. I won't go on because I know my time is up and I'm free associating here. But I did start a couple of graduate programs after that, and then I went into training to be a psychoanalyst. So in a nutshell, I'm using the upper part of my body and working down instead of the down part of my body working up, trying to put it all together. So I'll tell you more later.
Thank you. So I feel really badly. I never took tap classes. I just want to say that right out loud. Never took tap classes. But I started dancing when I was 9 years old, and my mother also wanted to be a dancer, so who became the dancer? Me. She enrolled me in classes with a local woman, and they were all creative dance classes where we explored our relationship to moving, how we felt. It was perfect for a dramatic kid. I loved it. So this continued when I began taking classes at the New Dance Group in New York City that had children's classes on Saturday morning. There I was introduced to the use of space, something really exciting for me, and that I could do whatever I wanted when I could leap and run, and doing every dance combination of locomotor movements that were executed in different rhythms. So there was space, there was rhythm, there was emotion. It was really exciting for me. New Dance Group, that Mimi also mentioned, was founded with the desire to combine radical left-wing politics with dance. And it became my dance home for decades. It was there that I performed in the Teen Repertory Company under the leadership of 5 modern dance luminaries. Jane Dudley, I also studied with her, Sophie Maslow, Muriel Manning, and Donald McHale. College landed me at Adelphi University with a major in dance. There I had to enroll in multiple diverse technique classes in modern dance, taught by professional dancers from the companies of Hanya Holm, Merce Cunningham, and Martha Graham. Ballet classes, which I must admit were not my favorite, led to toe, which was even less my favorite, but I also took character dance and rhythmic analysis classes, and I can safely say that everything I learned in all of these classes, including the discipline of ballet, was what I drew on in my dance therapy training and also in my practice and my teaching today. I missed studying with Marian Chace in 1969, when I was at the end of my junior year in college, and I was offered a chance to teach dance at a girls' riding camp in Colorado. So it was like, okay, leave New York, get to Colorado, study with Marian Chace, someone who I just heard about. So I went to Colorado, and I missed my opportunity. But I did then go to work with Lillian Espinack. And so my dance therapy training started there right out of college when I graduated in 1970. And so I enrolled in Lillian's psychomotor therapy training program in New York City. And it was taught at what was then called, and no longer what the kind of term that we want to use, but it was the Mental Retardation Clinic of New York Medical College, Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital. At the time, there were no other graduate degree programs, and in 1970s, Lillian was the only certificate program. It was a program steeped in dance and focused on working with individuals, primarily at that point with developmental delays of varying degrees. Lillian introduced us also to Laban's work, but not in depth. So in 1978, I enrolled in the Laban Institute of Movement Studies to learn the language of movement analysis so that I could more clearly explain what I was doing when I was presenting at Grand Rounds. And here I am today, 5 decades later, still dancing. So if you ever get the urge to call me on a Friday morning, please call after 11:30, because before that I'll be in my Eric Hawkins dance class. Thank you. And now I call on my good friend, Susan Kleinman.
I grew up in Joplin, Missouri. Some of you may have never even heard of it, called the Gateway to the Ozarks. There were 2 dance teachers in Joplin. My mother took me to one of them when I was 3 years old. They had to pry me off her chair. I was afraid to go into the studio, but I did. And I found that I really liked being there as long as I could blend into the class. I didn't want to have to be the one in front or anything like that. I liked it a lot also because I didn't have to practice. Like I had to practice the piano, and then later I had to practice the cello because I had to be well-rounded. My mother was very influential, like some of your mothers too. So I went on to college, and you had to declare a major. I went to the University of Oklahoma, and I didn't know what to major in, and I didn't know what to do. So I majored in dance, and because I seemed to have taken a liking to this, I was sent to Perry Mansfield Camp in Colorado one summer. And I heard one of the professors there, because there were professors from different colleges, play the piano, who taught classes and that kind of thing. And I heard him say the words, dance therapy. And I said, oh, that's what I'm going to do. So when I go back to school, I'm going to ask my advisor about dance therapy. And that's what I'm going to become. So that was 1964. There were no programs. There were very few people doing this thing called dance therapy. But we wrote to Menninger's, which was the only psychiatric hospital we'd heard of, and they knew of this woman called Marian Chace. But then there was an article in the Kansas City Herald, and my mother saw it, and it was about this woman whose name was Sue Ellen Freed. Could you clap if you remember her? Sue Ellen is very dear to me and very dear to thousands, maybe millions of people. She died only a few weeks ago at the age of 92, and she was still working up until the end. She changed many aspects of our world, and we can be very grateful for her existence. I certainly was. She took me into her home. She took me to Osawatomie State Hospital, and I got to see her work, and I said, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And I said, I'm going to work with Marian Chace, this woman in Washington. And when I come back, I'll tell you all about what I learned, because Sue Ellen had gone for 3 days. Had she gotten to work with Marian Chace for 3 days, and I was going for 2 months. So I went, and I ended up staying 4 months. Now this was a big deal, because if you went to study at Turtle Bay, you only went for 3 weeks. And then you had to go back and do whatever you were going to do. I had 4 months. That was enough time to learn how to dress in a dirndl skirt like she wore, how to find shoes, these little gym shoes that she wore, how to wear keys around my waist, how to be fairly neutral, and how to relate to psychiatric patients. I loved it. I just couldn't get enough of it. When I went home back to Joplin, I began looking for a job. Now, I almost came to Chicago, had a job offer here. I ended up in Pittsburgh and working at the Western site, which was the university, the med school, related to the Pitt Med School, and I was there for 6 years. So I was the first dance therapist in Western Pennsylvania. Beth was in Eastern Pennsylvania. And I went on a vacation to Florida, and it was so pretty. I thought I would move there. So I did, and I was the first dance movement therapist in the state of Florida. This is a very lonely way to have to learn how to get jobs and that kind of thing. I couldn't get a job. I was told I was too well qualified. And maybe I should go back where I came from, or I could teach ballroom dance. Maybe that would work out. I went to the Miami Herald, and they printed an article about me. Here she is, too well qualified to do much of anything here. And then I had a friend who knew Larry King, so I got an interview with Larry King. Some of you remember him. So anytime there was an opportunity, I took it. To make a very long story short, I've worked for the past however many years that is, with many, many populations, and then settled in with women with eating disorders, suffering from trauma, and all kinds of issues like that. I find a passion for the work. I love it. I like to write about it. I like to read about it. I like to teach about it. And the other thing I have always loved is working with these people who are sitting behind me here. And I found it wonderful, the role models, to be able to learn about this field, to push myself, to advocate, to go out into the world. And it's been very satisfying, and I'm not ready to stop, so I just keep on doing it. I'll talk to you a little later too, but right now I think I'm going to introduce Elissa White.
I'm so happy to be in my hometown of Chicago, where I began to study dance at the age of 10. I actually went with my neighbor to dance class, and she left and I stayed. I studied at Francis Alice's dance studio, which is like practically around the corner from here. And from there, I went to study with Stone Cameron Ballet School, which is at the other end of the loop. My parents were union organizers, so they were on strike like twice a year. And for some strange reason, Francis put me on scholarship, so I was really, really lucky. I was on scholarship for years. With Stone Cameron, I was a member of their ballet company, and we toured in and around Chicago and as far as Minneapolis. I just had to put that in for Millie. Since as a child, I was pretty nonverbal, and what I really learned is through dance, I could express my feelings. I went to New York at the age of 20 and mostly taught dance, having limited success as a professional dancer. In 1963, I studied with Marian Chace in her second class at Turtle Bay Music School. I was in the first ever training program in 65-66, now known as LMA, with Irmgard Bartenieff and her two assistants, Martha Davis and Forstine Pollet. In my middle 70s, I joined the Anahit Sophian Middle Eastern Dance Company, and all I would just like to say is what you really need to do is to keep dancing. Thank you.
So now we come to the part of our program where we're going to be speaking about the icons, who, by the way, every one of the icon was a charter member of ADTA. We wanted to let you know that. Sharon is going to introduce us to what we should know about them.
I just want to make note that all the faces that you see up there were very creative women who found out that their dance was important in many other ways than performance and began to use dance in a way that was different. And each of these people were both our teachers or mentors or later influenced us in their thinking. And so we want to tell you a little about each one of them so that you know who they are. And I will give this to Beth to begin.
I want to start by telling you about a book. Some of you may know about it. It's called Branching Out. Has anyone ever read this book? It was published in 2000. It's about the 6 dance therapy, the 6 dance organizations in the United States. And one of them written up in this book is the American Dance Therapy Association. And they interviewed oral interviews with the people that they felt were the influencers of each of the 6 organizations. And I want to read to you what they say about Marian Chace. Everybody in this room is here either directly or indirectly because of Marian Chace and the founding of the American Dance Therapy Association. There's no way to avoid it. She was and is, well, some of you may not like this, but I call her the Freud of dance therapy. She's influenced all of us here. We wouldn't be here without her. So I want to read what they said in 2000. Marian Chace was born in 1896, very long time ago. She is best known for her 20 years of work as a dance therapist and music supervisor at the psychotherapy section of St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., where she was a full-time employee for over 20 years. During that period, she developed the burgeoning field of dance movement therapy. During this time, Chace also worked as a dance therapist and dance director at Chestnut Lodge in Rockville, Maryland. Yeah. She taught dance therapy workshops at Turtle Bay Music School, which I referred to in New York, the 3-week program that made you a dance therapist in those days, or didn't. And she was invited by the Rubin Academy of Music in Jerusalem to direct and teach a dance therapy workshop in Israel. Chace lectured and gave workshops in dance therapy for professionals and students at hospitals, clinics, universities throughout the United States and abroad. Marian Chace studied dance and taught at the Denishon School and performed with that company. She studied also with Martha Graham, Anya Holm, and at the Vigmont School. In 1930, Chace moved to Washington, D.C. to co-direct a branch of the Denishon School, where she began her interest in dance as a basic form of human interaction and in how the body action relates
to emotional problems. She studied at the Washington School of Psychiatry, and she studied with Dr. Frieda Fromm-Reichman and was strongly influenced by the famous analyst Harry Stack Sullivan. Marian Chace was a founder and the first elected president of the American Dance Therapy Association, and she died in July of 1970. Without her, maybe not, there would have ever been an American Dance Therapy Association. But posthumously, I would like to thank her because she has affected so many of us in our thinking, in our lives, in our professional development.
I'm just going to say a few words about Trudy Shoup. Trudy Shoup was born about 1904 in Zurich, Switzerland. And she had mental health problems of her own, which meant that what she did for herself was to rent a studio and just work them out in dance. She danced herself from whatever it was that her problems were into a healthier place, all on her own. She stayed in Switzerland during the Second World War and began to perform as a very well-known, she was a comedian. She had a great sense of humor and satire, and she was known as the feminine Charlie Chaplin. One of the things she did was perform the Dying Swan wearing black tutu and a hitless mustache. And when any German officers would come into the cabaret where she was performing, she was warned ahead of time not to do that particular dance that night. So after that, she formed her own company and traveled through Europe performing, and came to the States through Saul Burak, who had her come here. She moved from Switzerland into California in 1947. And began to work at Camarillo State Hospital in California. She developed a technique of working with schizophrenics that she called body-ego technique. And her goal was to be able to break through isolation with schizophrenia so that people could relate to each other. And she was quite successful. And she was a very important part of our association as we went along, as a charter member and a teacher.
Irmgard Barteniev was a truly Renaissance woman who was steeped in the arts, the sciences, and the humanities. She danced all of her life, beginning at age 10. At age 25, Irmgard went to study with Laban when he was developing Lama notation as well as space harmony with Ruth Lesser, and eukinetics, where effort was Ducia Vereska. In 1936, Irmgard, her husband, and their children left Germany, as her husband was Jewish and came to the United States. Eventually, Irmgard became a physical therapist and worked with children in several children's hospitals. She incorporated her PT works and principles of Laban's, mostly space harmony. In the 1960s, she began teaching an introductory effort course at the Dance Notation Bureau. Around 1966, she, together with Martha Davis and Forstine Bollet, who I mentioned before, instituted the first ever shape training program. It was in this first class that I worked with Irmgard. Prior to this, under the auspices of Israel Zorling, she began doing dance therapy at a day hospital in the Bronx. Eventually, at Bronx Day Hospital, she, Martha Davis, Claire Schmeiss, and I did research in family therapy. Claire and I started the dance therapy program, and Irmgard worked with the cognitively impaired population.
I was also fortunate to work with Irmgard at Bronx Psychiatric Center with the patients and doing research, looking at movement through a one-way screen. That's the way we did it then. And I was honored when she asked me to teach with her at the teach an effort-shaped class at the Dance Notation Bureau. It has been said that to Irmgard, working with someone was like taking an adventure. The two of them were on together on this adventure. She was fascinated and curious about what would happen. And she had an uncanny capacity to know how to motivate an individual to move in a way that was unique to that person. My mentor, Jean Erdman, had also studied with Irmgard and credited her with being a primary inspiration in the structure of her open-eye total theater, a total theater concept. For the core of Irmgard's perspective with human beings was holistic, seeing all the parts of an individual as a whole. As a tribute to Irmgard at her memorial, Marcia Siegel wrote, Irmgard thought in global terms, holistic terms. She thought mind, body, and action are one, that the individual is one with the culture, and that function is one with expression, space with energy, art with work, with environment, with religion. When you spend a lot of time around Irmgard, you could get pretty confused, actually, and have to go to sort things out by yourself. But you could never again see the universe as a collection of isolated particles. That was really Irmgard. And in addition, and most importantly, I have a very personal memory of Irmgard as a true healer, because you could actually feel the healing energy emanating from her hands if you were close to her. And now I'm very happy to introduce again Nana Koch.
I will be speaking to you about Lillian and Elizabeth Polk, and also Blanche Evan. So I have the great fortune of being able to work with both Lillian and Elizabeth. Like all the icons, Lillian's background was steeped in dance. She danced at an early age in her native Norway, in Berger, Norway. She finished high school at the age of 16 and went to Germany to study. Of course, her most significant dance influence was Mary Wigman. She received a scholarship to study at Mary's school, and then she was so good that she joined the company and became Wigman's assistant. And she performed with Mary's company throughout Europe in all the opera houses. Under Wigman's tutelage, Lillian learned the power of dancing your emotions. And when I studied with her, she said that almost every single day. While in Germany, she also studied dance at Dalcroze Eurythmics, Nadau Rhythmic Gymnastics, and Mensendiek Therapeutic Movement Corrective Exercises. These techniques also influenced the development of Lillian's work in what she called psychomotor therapy. But like Elizabeth Polk and some other figures in dance therapy, Lillian's life in Germany came to a critical juncture during the war, as she had to leave Germany so she wouldn't be persecuted by the Nazis for not being a collaborator and for being an intellectual who had books in Russian and Italian in her studio that was opened when she left Wigman's company. She was able to get passage to England and then New York, where she took dance classes and taught dance classes, and where she met students where they were emotionally, which she told us also every day that we studied with her. Best known for her work in psychomotor therapy, or what she called her work, psychomotor therapy, it developed out of the influence of her mentors and her teachers, who were Mary Wigman, and medical doctors and psychotherapists Alfred Adler and Alexander Lowen, whom she studied with in New York. Lillian's work in psychomotor therapy, which she said was a form of dance therapy, is a system of diagnosis, restructuring, and integration that uses movement to change the emotions through the body by stimulating activity, releasing emotion, and encouraging socialization through contact with the therapist and the group. Lillian emphasized psychomotor therapy focused on an individual's physical, expressive, psychological, and cultural aspects revealed in a psychotherapeutic context. It provides tools to help clients become aware of their personal conflicts, and it provided therapeutic interventions that helped to resolve life conflicts. Lillian applied psychomotor therapy to work with those with developmental delays first, that was where she started working, and then with a variety of client populations. In 1960, she joined the faculty of New York Medical College, and in 1964, working with children who had developmental delays, she developed what I think perhaps were the first assessments of working with clients that she called movement diagnostic tests. And these 7 tests were developed to build a profile to ascertain where there were body blockages and disruptions to the flow of energy, which Lillian called one's life force, borrowed, of course, from the work that she did with Adler, who spoke a lot about life force and energy. The tests were meant to reveal also the areas of the body that display weaknesses or blocks that inhabit the flow of natural movement. In 1965, Lillian began the first year-long postgraduate certificate program at the Mental Retardation Clinic of Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital. It was a 20-hour-a-week program for a year. It integrated, as again, the work of Wigman, Lowen, and Adler, and Lillian's very particular way of wedding her dance experience and her understanding of the emotional experience of dancing, of moving. And it was exciting. I loved it. And I wish that you could have experienced it too. She published her really seminal work in 1981, a book called Dance Therapy. And as I looked at it the other day, I thought, why am I not reading this more? Because it's really brilliant. So if you have an opportunity, you can get it on Amazon. It's a really good book. So thank you for listening. And now about the woman who actually said the words dance therapy to me, Elizabeth Polk. As a dance major in college, I had the good fortune of studying dance history with dancer, dance educator, dance therapist Elizabeth. When I walked into that class, little did I know about Elizabeth's innovative work in dance with children with a range of physical, emotional, and developmental delays. Her own dance history as a celebrated concert dancer through Austria and the former Czechoslovakia. She was also a physical educator, a dance educator, and it paved the way for being a notable and admired dance therapist who was also a charter member of ADTA. Born in Vienna in 1902, Elizabeth spent her childhood and youth studying modern dance, ballet, Dalcroze eurythmics, gymnastics, music theory, and piano. In her early adult years, Elizabeth taught dance in pre-war Vienna, which came to an end when it became clear that she and her Jewish husband were in danger during the war, and they had to leave Austria to avoid persecution. Here in the US, a newly arrived immigrant, she forged a path that led to opening a home studio in Sunnyside, Queens, and teaching creative dance primarily to children, but also to adults. But of course, she didn't stop there. Elizabeth taught workshops for dance counselors at the Young Men's and Young Women's Hebrew Association in New York City, She taught adult and family classes in creative dance on Long Island. In 1957, she became a regional dance instructor at the Lexington School for the Deaf. In 1962, she became a dance and movement therapist for the Childville School, a residential treatment center, again for emotionally disturbed children. In 1958, she co-founded the National Dance Teachers Guild, of which some of you may or may not be a member. For decades, she was a staff member at Adelphi University in the Children's Center for Creative Arts. She also then served as an assistant professor in the dance and physical education department, and that's where I met her. This is really interesting. In 1965 to 1991, she was also a dance and movement therapist at the Lifeline Center for Child Development in Queens. The interesting part to me is that this was when she worked at the Child Development Center between the ages of 63 and 89. And the only reason that she stopped was because the equipment became too difficult to move from room to room. Those of you that have been schlepping for years from room to room, you probably know exactly what that felt like. Imagine her still doing that at 89. So out of her work with children, she produced 3 musical records, and I've put the covers of those records on the screen. Further recognition led her to help shape the curriculum in New York City schools, and she developed teaching modules for gymnastics, physical education, dance, and music teachers. So no wonder that in 1995 she was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award from ADTA in recognition of her contribution to this field. She's published many articles, including the seminal 1974 Dance Therapy with Special Children in Kathleen Mason's book, if I'm correct. This is also a piece of history for her. In 2013, the house where Elizabeth lived in the Sunnyside Gardens Historic District was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. If you see the plaque in the middle of this picture, it's a memorial plaque in her honor. And I'm thinking that perhaps Elizabeth may be the only dance therapist in the world that has her home memorialized. Blanche Evan. Bonnie Bernstein has studied with Blanche Evan. As long as Blanche was alive, Bonnie was her student and also her assistant. So I asked Bonnie to write something about Blanche, and here is what she said. Blanche Evan devoted her life to cultivating the full potential of dance, beginning as a choreographer and performer in the emerging modern dance world of the 1930s. She was always a renegade and an independent thinker. As a solo dancer, her choreography was evocative, exposing audiences to psychological, cultural, and social justice themes. To counter the trend toward increasingly stylized modern dance training, Evan developed her system called functional technique, a pioneering model of dance training devoid of habitual styles and oriented to the dancer's individuality. In 1934, at the age of 25, Evan opened the New York City Creative Dance Studio, introducing her innovative pedagogy to hundreds of children and adults for the next 2 decades, while publishing articles and training teachers in her unique methods. Evan's creative dance focused on the developmental, social, and dance technique skills of her students. This was coupled with her innovative emphasis on guided improvisation, cultivating authentic expression emerging from students' individual imagination and psychological needs. Although not called dance therapy until 1953, Evan's creative dance and functional techniques and the innovations were the scaffolding for emerging dance therapy methods. Evan's theory, developed to meet the psychosocial challenges of the normal neurotic urban adult, had marked differences from dance movement therapy for the psychiatric inpatient or the mentally disabled, the methods that were prevalent at the time that she started working. Evan's client population had the ego strength and capacity to safely benefit from depth, insight, oriented improvisation to confront challenging life conflicts, traumas, and self-concept issues. Clients delved into their deepest feelings, embodied their past and their future, and they gained new insights through Evan's depth improvisation process. Her transformative self-discovery through dance opens doors for exploring life alternatives, resolving the impacts of trauma, building positive self-concept, and healthy relationship change. Unique to Evan's method and her therapy training approach is the ongoing emphasis on creative dance education to expand spontaneity, resiliency, and expressive freedom. This commitment to keeping dance education and freeing improvisation central to her dance movement therapy and therapist training remains alive in her methods today. Thank you. And now I turn you over to Marcia, who will speak about Mary Whitehouse and Alma Hawkins.
So I left out a lot of things when I was talking about myself because I was really attempting to keep, a very quick piece. But one of the things that I really need to say is that when I was at UCLA, and the reason I became a dance therapist, and the reason I even met Alma Hawkins is because of a psychiatrist named J. Alfred Cannon. He was the chief resident psychiatrist at the Neuropsychiatric Institute, which was part of UCLA, and he'd heard about the dance department, and he'd heard about Alma Hawkins. The reason he'd heard is because when he was in medical school in New York, he was bored out of his mind. He'd been a football player, had a very bad injury, and was depressed because he thought he was going to be a pro football player. And one of his professors said, Al, you're a smart guy, why don't you go to medical school? So he did. And during his psychiatric rounds, or whatever, when he was learning, he discovered Martha Graham. And it isn't so much that he studied there, but he saw people moving and dancing, and somehow he got it in his mind that if ever he could be with patients and do something, he was going to include dance. He asked Dr. Hawkins if she would come and dance with his patients at the NPI. NPI was a short-term acute facility. At that time, it had adults, adolescents, and children. Dr. Hawkins was at a turning point in her career. She had been a dance educator, never for a moment doubted that dance could change people's lives. She was coming from an educational perspective at the time, and she saw these students as freshmen. By the time they were seniors, they were becoming members of professional companies because of the way that she was able to teach them. So she thought, let me go down and see what this Dr. Cannon's talking about. And the first year, she started to work with some of the adults and adolescents. The second year is when I entered graduate school. I was given a teaching assistantship my first day, and I thought I'd be teaching modern dance 1A to PE majors. And Dr. Hawkins said, meet me at the NPI. I didn't know what NPI meant. I had to ask for directions. I went down there, and I was working in a psychiatric facility. That is not what I expected. I was a dancer. I was working in movies. I had this career. I was just killing time before my next big break in show business came. What was I doing with psychiatric patients? Well, little did I know. I was given 4 children to work with individually, and my life changed forever. All I knew how to do was to be with them in movement, and I improvised. I had come from theater. I knew a lot about improvisation, and I started to improvise with them. So I was reaching them through movement. I knew very little about psychology. I'd been a theater arts major in college. I'd had 1 or 2 psych courses. That became ultimately the research project, which we studied body image and self-concept as they changed one's personality and their ability to learn. It was very, very, very specific research, and because of that, I stayed an extra year doing my master's. That's how long it took them to analyze the statistics. Dr. Cannon was totally supportive of this project, and the statistics was accepted, and when I turned in my thesis, and being, as I said earlier, ballet taught me discipline and showing up no matter what. That's what I learned in writing this master's thesis. They said to me, this could be a doctoral dissertation. And I will tell you from the bottom of my heart, my doctoral dissertation isn't as good as my master's thesis. So That is what happened to me, and that's making a very long story short, but we owe Dr. Cannon that amazing foresight that he had, and Dr. Hawkins coming down and beginning to work with patients and using the same philosophy that she had. And her philosophy was that inside each of us is a creative person, a creative urge, and you can develop it at any time. And I felt very honored, I feel very honored, and I will never ever not mention Dr. Hawkins, Dr. Valerie Hunt, who I'll talk about in a minute, and Mary Whitehouse. Now what's interesting is that Alma was a discovery of people. She thought broadly. Her background was she came from Missouri, came to New York. In those days, all she could study was PE, but she wanted to dance. She came to New York with her PE degree, started to study with all the major dance people at the time in the New York area, and she talks about roaming through the streets with her little Victrola and her records to go do her classes at the Y and at some of the settlement houses, which was available in those days, which was the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. She eventually got her doctorate after being very exposed to great thinkers of the time. I won't go into all of them. She was born, I'm going to give you certain dates because I don't have them in front of me, approximately 1906. She died approximately the year 2000. She probably would have lived to be 100, but she caught a very, very bad flu. There was a flu epidemic in California, so she died at about age 93 or 94. What I loved about Alma, when she was 70, she was forced to retire from UCLA. And she said, I've just got it together at 70, and now I have to retire. So she decided she would go and work with the old people. Now, when she said that, I was pretty young, so I'm thinking, doesn't she consider herself old? 70? Now I consider that teenagers, right? But at any rate, she continued working. And one of her students who had graduated was running a program at Santa Monica College, which was a community college, asked Alma to come and teach a course in how you change your body through dance movement. And I happened to be on sabbatical one of those times, so I was in the class reconnecting with Alma, and that class was full of everybody from people that had never danced in their life to movie stars. It was changing people's lives. Alma wrote her last book in her 80s. So for me, it's been fantastic to have these amazing mentors. Valerie Hunt wrote her last book when she was about 90. She died at about 99. Alma was about 93. They never got dementia. They didn't have Alzheimer's, or if they did, nobody discovered it because they kept working. They kept dancing to the very end. As I say, Alma was a broad thinker. She brought, for instance, she discovered and brought these people to UCLA to work with her students. Jacobson and Jacobson's progressive relaxation. She brought in Harold Rugg about creativity. John Martin, the great dance philosopher. She taught us about Susan Langer and creativity and the aesthetics of art. But all of that she brought back to the concept of dance. Now, for me, the way it affected me deeply in my work for my whole life, I was doing this project at the NPI, and they had decided I was doing this master's thesis, so I'd work with the children one-to-one. I just tuned out everything because I was in an arena where anybody could come in because Dr. Cannon gave me access to the entire hospital and all the charting, etc., which I used in the thesis, but everybody else could come in and watch because he wanted people to see that dance was doing something to heal these psychiatric patients. And one day I was exhausted. I was tired. I was, holding the space, which we didn't have that word for holding the space then. And Alma came, she would watch, and I said, Alma, have you ever doubted? I was going to say self. And she said, dance, never. And that switched something in me, it changed something in me. And I said, no, she's right. Never doubt dance. Never doubt the dance. So that was very important for me. I know I'm really making a real big summary of Alma's life, but the thing we need to appreciate about her, she didn't go into the hospitals like everybody has talked about, Marian Chace, for instance, but she took what she knew about the human being, the human soul, and she was way ahead of her time. She was, before polyvagal theory. She knew these things in her heart and in her soul from dance. And she brought these to the Neuropsychiatric Institute. I was her assistant. In turn, I got it through osmosis. That's what happens when we have mentors. We take it in. It's what I talked about in the embodied panelment in La Jolla in our 50th anniversary. We have to honor our mentors, just as you honor all the people you've studied with, because you take it in by osmosis. And I say that because one day Sharon Chaiklin said to me, I don't know if you remember Sharon, but it was a long time ago, and she said, we're doing something about White House. Do you have anything about White House? Do you have a tape or anything? Because she knew I'd worked with White House for years. And I did, I had lots of tapes. So I was going through my tapes and I couldn't find it. I said, oh, and I was listening to a tape, it was really interesting. I said, oh gosh, that was a good tape. That was me doing such and such. And I thought, that was really clever. Well, I have to remember to do that in my next workshop. And then I stopped. I said, oh my God, we take in. I was Mary. I felt, in other words, everything I did came from Mary, not everything, but the way I was leading groups, the way I was talking, the tone of my voice. And that's when I realized that that word embodied is so overused now, I know, but now I understand what embodiment then I understood what embodiment meant. Whether you know it or not, you're taking it in. It's going to our cells, and our cellular structure is changing because of these amazing people that we've been able to train with, study with, be in the presence of. Now, as I said, Alma discovered many people. She brought them to UCLA to work with her students, including Mary Whitehouse. By the way, Mary had a Jungian analysis, and this is important to remember, and she'd also worked with Mary Wiegmann. Wiegmann was in Germany, and Wiegmann was the one that when she danced, you got into the emotion. Before that, it was just technique, you did technique. So between Duncan and Wiegmann, you were feeling things. They also worked with Ted Shawn. There's such a thread here, which we can't get into now, but Ted Shawn, who believed that dance was the only way to be in life and the only way that we ever expressed ourselves. And of course, Marian Chace was part of the Shawn Company, Denny Shawn Company. Well, Mary comes back to the United States. She had 2 children to raise as a single mom. So she started to teach dance, and she was very clear about it. I started to teach dance because I had to do it to, pay for my kids. So we could live. But she had this sensibility about the passion in movement and her Jungian analysis of going to that depth place inside. And this is how she started to develop her work. She had a little studio very close to UCLA on Santa Monica Boulevard, just a few streets down from major campus of UCLA. And one of the things she taught us is that in every action, find how it connects to you. So she would teach us, because she was a very good dancer, by the way. So she taught us Graham's contraction and release. And she said it's the agony and the ecstasy. And then we would improvise on agony and ecstasy and find it in our own bodies. Or we would do Humphrey's, and I can't do it anymore. I would show you, but then I'd be dead, and that'd be the end of this one. But some of you may know it. I'm going to show you with my wonderful arms that still have range. You would do the Humphrey Weidman. You would rise and you'd fall onto the floor. Do you remember that? And you'd get up, and it looked like you were flying. Well, then, what did that mean? What does it mean to go here to that moment and then come down? Where are you? So we started to get into our bodies. Now, I have one quick anecdote to tell you about Mary. Mary is brought to UCLA for the first time to work with a group of us that were studying for a master's degree in dance. We were all dancers. There were about only 6 or 7 of us. Mary said, I want you to lie down on the floor, and I don't want you to move until you feel the urge to move. Nobody knew what she was talking about. What do you mean, the urge to move? What does that mean? But we were afraid to say anything because, we're students and we don't want to, get kicked out of class or whatever. So we're lying there, all of us. And my eyes are looking, you're looking to see what is anybody else doing. Urge to move, what does that mean? What does that mean? I'm thinking, oh God, I'm flunking out. Well, that's all right, I'll just go back to Rome. I'll start working movies again, it doesn't matter. And I'm thinking all this is going on in my head, not moving, because she said don't move till you have an urge. I don't have an urge, all I'm doing is saying, what am I doing on the floor? What am I supposed to do? And I see somebody who's starting to do pantomime, and then somebody else is doing some unbelievable, feeling from their heart dance, and I'm lying there like a lump. I thought, okay, it's life. It's life. Don't worry about it. You'll go to law school, okay? No. Finally, I thought, I got to do something. So I go like this. Or maybe these people over here can't see it. I raise my hand and put it down. Now, when the experience ends, I'm ready for Mary to say bye-bye. She says, well, folks, I don't think you understood what I meant. There's only one person here who did what I asked. And we're waiting, who's that one person? Was it the meme? Was it the expressive dancer? She says, that was Marcia. She didn't mean me. She said, there was to be another Marcia, right? And I'm looking around. She said, what? She said, I told you not to move till you felt the urge. She's the only one that laid there, and the only urge she had was this. Well, I never told her that wasn't an urge. That was just like... Anyway, Mary didn't call it dance therapy, she called it movement in depth. Occasionally she would say authentic movement. She'd say, you have to go to that authentic place. Now, what's interesting is that from that work that we did, and from Alma bringing Mary in, we all started to work with Mary. We worked with her for a long time, as you know. Maybe you don't know, but Mary was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and her career stopped. And Mary was amazing. Susan Lovell, who used to be very active in our organization, and I went to see Mary. And at that time, I was already a professor at NYU, and Susan was teaching at UCLA, and we had lunch with Mary, and Mary was in remission. And she said, and these are her words, not mine, she said, you girls know so much more than I would ever know. And she said, you understand now about transference and countertransference. I didn't. It was a very profound moment, because Mary, she went out with her students, she went out with her patients. We weren't called patients. You know, there was a lot of crossing over boundaries and borders and mixing and matching, which actually didn't work. But it was a very profound moment. She was a very amazing woman, died way too young. Anyway, that's a little bit about Mary and Alma. And I'm sorry, I really should say Dr. Hawkins, but yeah. Alma Hawkins. The one thing about Alma Hawkins is that she continued working until she got this terrible flu, and she was working with the elders. She was already in her 90s, and she incorporated a lot. She changed a lot. Her understanding changed a lot, but what's interesting to me, and this is for all of us here, we've all worked with most of these people. Most of us studied with Trudy Shoup. I certainly worked with Blanche for years. Everybody here probably worked with Elizabeth and with Lillian. It's not that we didn't, and we're not talking just about the only people we worked with. So we've all had a lot of experience with all of these people, and it comes together in the moments that we teach, in the moments that we do work with our clients, the moment that we can hold the space and be there present in that moment. And as I say, I do my best working soul to soul, which are words I can put to the work I did with those children early on and the profound changes that we saw at that time. That's it for Hawkins. And
thank you. So we're going to be moving into another section of our presentation, looking at how ADTA began. And Beth and Sharon, Beth and Sharon were there at the very, very, very beginning. So I know that there's a backstory, and if you could give us some brief remarks about what the backstory is on how ADTA began and the role of all of you in that process.
Well, Beth told you about how she started at Eastern in Pennsylvania and how she was working. Well, about 1963 or so, she wrote an article in Sarah Lawrence magazine, which came out about alumni, about her work. And at that time, I had 4 young children, and I was very restless about what am I going to do besides raise children. And I saw that article, and I said, wow, that's exactly what I want to do. I don't know what it means, but I know that's what I must do. And so I called Beth and said, Beth, how do I start with this? What do I do? And Beth told me, you're in Baltimore now. Go down to St. Elizabeth's Hospital and speak to Marian Chace. And that's exactly what I did. And so I started there, and Claire Schmace, who had been in the Turtle Bay class with Beth, was there at the time, because she was in Washington living there. And so we began to talk. And then
Yeah. So, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. All right. Sharon's story was interesting because I said, run, don't walk. From Baltimore to Washington to meet Marian Chace, and she listened. She did it. And the next thing I knew, I got a call from Sharon and Claire that they wanted to come up to Philadelphia and come follow me around the state hospital, which they did for half of a day. And while we were doing this improvisation together in the different wards, one of us said, you know, we really need to get all of us together somehow. It's just not enough to be so isolated from each other. And we came up with an idea at that time. We got to talk to Miriam. We got to get her to help us form an organization. Well, we knew from what Marian had said all along that she was not necessarily in favor of everybody getting together and forming an organization. So about a couple of months later, or maybe it was 6 months later, I went to Washington, D.C., and we had lunch at a Chinese restaurant directly across from St. E's. The four of us. It was Sharon and Claire and Kathy Pasternak, who unfortunately is not one of us right now. I think she's passed away. I heard her. Yeah. She was Marian's assistant at that time. The four of us sat there and we schemed about a conversation with Marian. Sharon, you want to say something?
Yeah, we said there are a lot of restless people up in New York City, and if we don't start an association, they will. And that was what did it. She did not want that to happen.
That's exactly what happened. Yes, we put that out, and she bit. And she said, okay, okay, round up people, do whatever you want, and we'll have a meeting. And she had one in 1964. I think it was at her house. I think there were 17 people who came to that meeting.
A lot of people from Turtle Bay who had been involved in her teaching there came, and then we began to reach out to all the people who would be interested, because without a profession, without an organization, you do not have a profession. And that's what we were trying to create, make sure that it did not just disappear, or become somebody else's idea, which was not what Marian's ideas were. And so we began to reach out and find out who was interested in becoming involved with us. Out of the woodwork, we got enough people. Well, you can see we had 75 charter members eventually who joined us to help. The charter members mean that they gave us money, so we had money to create an organization.
By the way, the first conference was at the Lincoln Center. We got a connection with Genevieve Oswald. I don't recall how we got that connection, but she was very supportive. And that was a wonderful place to have our first conference.
In 1966 this was, but that was after we first incorporated.
Yes.
Because we needed to be able to be an organization, and in order to do that, you incorporate in the state of Maryland, because that's where I was living, and my house became the office, 905 Walnut Avenue on the original papers. That's where I was living, and
Phantom Street.
Phantom Court.
That's where I live now. But we began to, before the first conference in 1966, we actually met earlier in Baltimore, at the Lord Baltimore Hotel, where they now say there are ghosts. But we all went there and as a way of beginning to form a relationship and a network of people who are interested in doing the work of forming an organization. So
that was Incorporation Day, wasn't it? Yes. I just want to mention something about our husbands. Because we were totally, I would say almost a totally female group. We had one man, Joe Fisher, who was very, very active and helped us with things called standards and ethics. He was a very, very wonderful guy. He was a music therapist, correct. But our husbands' businesses very often contributed greatly to our free pro bono help. For instance, Sharon's husband was a philosophy teacher and a history teacher, wasn't he? Social work teacher at University of Maryland, and he was very instrumental in our thinking, our writing, being able to give us advice. My husband was in the advertising business, and that's why I became chair of the Public Relations Committee, the first Public Relations Committee, because we got free advertisements and the logo. And I want to speak about the logo because that was done by a very fine artist at my husband's advertising agency. They sent us samples that we took to the board, and we voted on the one we liked best. And that was our first logo a very long time ago. I'm sorry it's changed, by the way. And some people still have jewelry that looks like that. That's very precious. Is that sufficient for the beginning? Do you have any more questions? Okay.
I think you see now kind of a reenactment of us New York people, Elissa and me, being very eager to form an organization because finally we started to have meetings in New York. They were at my apartment, I'm glad to say. There were a lot of people there. Marian did come to some meetings, and Irmgard was there, and Blanche Evan. We formed a legal committee to find out everything we had to do about hiring a lawyer and getting finances in order. And we had a meeting at Turtle Bay to vote on incorporation. And since I apparently couldn't be there, I wrote an impassioned and rather irritated letter in favor of incorporation. I said, we need a real organization within which we can fruitfully work to develop and explore. If we go on without incorporation, we should be aware that our whole idea will stagnate or dwindle. And my dear friend Elissa, who was part of this New York group, she has reminded me that I also apparently became quite irritated and angry at our New York committee because they didn't realize that we had to immediately write bylaws if we were to be a real association. So I was the cranky one in New York, and some of you know me that way now too, I'm sure. So the legal committee then evolved into the bylaws committee. B. Becker, who was a very important part of the beginning, B. Becker and I worked together on the bylaws, and as Sharon said, we didn't really know what we were doing. We looked at bylaws of other associations and as guides, and we covered membership, meetings, and purpose. And the bylaws, of course, have been amended many times since the originals, and they still offer a clear structure and guide. as to how the ADTA operates, and they must be followed and fulfilled diligently. Each one has been written and included with a true purpose, and I urge you to take the time, take a few minutes and read your bylaws so you'll know what the structure of the association was based on and is still based on, not just words on paper. Now I'm going to talk very briefly about the publications of the ADTA. I was a co-editor with Marcia, I think in the 80s, of the Dance Therapy Journal, but a newsletter was the first publication that we had, and the newsletter was just for the members. The first Dance Therapy Journal was intended for a wider audience and was published in the spring and summer of 1977. It was edited by Joanna Harris, and it had articles by Mary Whitehouse and Sharon Chaiklin, who wrote on therapeutic goals in dance therapy. We also published many conference proceedings and special monographs that contain seminal dance therapy writings. And I have another urgent kind of message for you. I know that you tend to want to see the most current dance therapy writings and articles, but I'd like to encourage you to also take a look at some of the early writings in these publications that form the base of our profession and that still offer immutable concepts. And now I'd like to introduce my New York cohort, Elissa White.
Thanks, Cindy. So I'm going to talk about registry, which show the qualifications for a dance therapist, was on the wish list of people interested in forming a dance therapy association. This was in 1965, prior to incorporation. Unlike other professions, dance therapy had no academic programs. In '67, after incorporation, a questionnaire was sent to some members in order to learn the backgrounds and training of, quote, recognized dance therapists, unquote. During '68-69, both a code of ethics and registry guidelines were established, the latter based on the results of the questionnaire. In '70, the board of directors voted on instituting the registry with myself as chair, and Irmgard Bartenieff and Susan Sandell as members of the committee. Initially, registry was part of regular membership dues, and in 1981, registry became its own entity with a separate renewal fee. This was done so that if someone wanted to object to the registry committee's decision, the board of directors could make the final decision. Initially, Dance Therapy Registered, or the DTR, indicated someone had met the requirements established by the registry. In '84, with the advent of academic programs, meeting ADTA educational standards, a two-tier registry was established. The DTR was granted to graduates of approved programs, and the ADTR was granted to those who worked for 2 years full-time and who fulfilled a written essay and knowledge of dance movement therapy, theory and practice. In '92, the board of directors ratified a plan to institute CEs requiring ADTRs to obtain 100 hours every 5 years. This action indicated that the registry would now be a certification process, which is a more nationally accepted standard. Thus, the registry committee became the credentials committee. A task force with Stacy Hurst as chair was appointed by the board to pursue dance board certification. This task force worked diligently from 2004 to 2009. And in October 2009, the Board of Directors unanimously voted to create the Dance Movement Therapy Certification Board, or the DMTCB. The
The ADTA service marks were converted to registered dance movement therapist, R-DMT, and board certified dance movement therapist, or the BC-DMT. In May 2005, the membership ratified the bylaw revision to move to board certification. I would just like to say that many people have served on the registry credentials and board certification over the years, and it has not been an easy job, and I just want to thank everybody, and I'm amazed. That first question. And now, Marcia would like to talk. Will you talk on education, please?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so how extraordinary that these days an aspiring dancer, dreaming to put their skills and heart into becoming a change agent for our evolving society and planet, have so many choices where to study dance movement therapy. There are qualifying courses throughout the world on 6 continents, and several of the teachers and professors of the original dance movement therapy programs or their former students are still teaching or supervising in these programs. Worldwide, again, I come back to continuity and change, live and flourish. From the very first formal master's degree programs which began at Hunter College with Dr. Claire Schmays and Elissa White in New York City in 1971, it was created from a grant that they received from the National Institute of Mental Health's Experimental and Special Training Division as a model for dance therapy programs. And that was our very first program. From there, others grew. Within a year or two, NYU's program was formed. I was the director of the first program at NYU, and Hahnemann was Dr. Beth Kalish, which that later became Drexel. Antioch was Dr. Penny Bernstein and Mara Kapi, and UCLA was Dr. Alma Hawkins. So all of these programs began within a 3 or 4 year period. We are now a global phenomenon. We, from these early educational imperatives that we needed initially in order to define our profession, we have defined new ways of understanding and expanding the awareness as our language of movement has expanded as we are able to define and explore energy and shape, rhythm and holding, just to mention a few, as they allow for healing change, as we teach students change trajectory of individuals, which began with the dance. Defining and charting a blueprint unique from teaching students to dance as in order to perform or choreograph or create dances is very different than developing methods and techniques through a dance perspective that allowed for a therapeutic experience through the elements of dance. A method and growing technique which helped to define and explore the nonverbal realms of personality, making felt thought, early memories, and amorphous feelings concrete and expressed, and thereby brought to an awareness in which choice and change may create creativity and healing. And of course, our seminal focus upon DEI concerns where, and I'm putting quotes around this, normal, becomes an absurd relic, and full acceptance and celebration of differences are heralded and lauded. All this and more have been achieved through the healing dance experiences that were created early on in our dance movement therapy programs. Gradually, this basic educational concern of defining, refining, and expanding opportunities for allied professionals to experience the importance, the basic necessity of patients or clients to have the opportunities to develop, change, and heal on more than one dimension grew into a need to equip our students to meet various societal norms so they could get jobs. So they had to learn, and I'm putting quotes around this, adjunctive qualifications, along with the profound and groundbreaking integration of work that we offered as dance movement therapists. We had to begin adding coursework specifically related to counseling programs or social work programs in order to equip our students to move on into the world. Sorry, I just really have a hard time seeing all this. Sorry about that. So what's happened from this early experience of defining what could be dance, we literally had to develop from the air. There was no one to say, this is how you're going to teach dance movement therapy, and we were all at the universities, and we had to meet qualifications for the universities in order for people to get degrees. We started to realize that people needed even a more flexible way to study, because we were getting people that already had master's degrees from allied professions and wanted to come and learn about dance therapy. And so we started to begin the alternate route program. Again, it brought a lot of issues and problems with it, because we were balancing both the university programs and alternate route, and finally was formed. And you want to put up the other slide? Actually, Nana was the first chairperson of the SART committee, the subcommittee for essentially what it's about is saying that when you studied alternate route, you were going to get the same training at the same skill level with the same understanding of dance movement therapy as if you went to a university. However, it was going to be done in a different space, place, and time. And for some people who have done alternate route, it's taken anywhere from 5 to 20 years, whereas at the university, it's about 2 years. But we wanted to accommodate everything that was happening in the world, so both getting the counseling, social work, psychology degrees with multiple courses being added to what we had already started as we defined our profession, and then offering many ways to get our training was one of the things that we worked many years to achieve. And it's still open to development, but we're doing our very best. And by the way, the thing I want to say is that from the beginning, where we kept growing all the university programs, now we've growing the alternate route programs. There's a lot more of those than there are approved programs at the university level. So it's kind of interesting to see how it shifted, which means people need much more flexibility in where and how they're going to study. And Mimi is next.
Mimi is next, just speaking briefly about the international panel.
Yeah, soon many of us started traveling and teaching internationally. And there were many international students who came to the United States to study in these programs you've heard about. And as we grew in the 70s and 80s, I felt that I was president in 1994, and I felt that it was time that we heard from our global friends and started to see what was going on in other countries. So I created the international panel, and we had 12 countries to begin with. One of the panelists, Mr. Machida from Japan, is with us at this conference. I don't know if he's here, but you'll meet him. He's right there. It's from 1995. That was the first panel. I really am having trouble seeing this, but no, I'll figure it out. I must confess that a few members of my board then thought that it was, we had enough domestic problems and we shouldn't focus on the international elements, but I went ahead anyway, and I'm glad that we did. And over the years, we've had representatives from 58 different countries telling about dance therapy in their countries. Many panels focused on special topics, such as the one in New York City in 2010, where 12 panelists were all men from various nations who also danced for us. And other special topics have included work with children and on violence. And another very special event had panelists sharing their beginnings in dance therapy, as we have today, but from all over the world, and dancing with each other. And last year we had representatives of all the associations throughout the world telling about new developments. Next year will be our 30th panel, and I think that Tricia and I, who's my co-chair, will gracefully retire and give up the panel, and we very much hope that one or more of you will take over the chairmanship and continue. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to introduce again my very good friend, Judith Bunney, who will talk about legislation.
You didn't realize your association was so talkative and messy and involved. Please get involved. I want to talk about legislation, which is very dear to my heart because I lived in a suburb of Washington, D.C., where everything was about what was happening on Capitol Hill. Unfortunately, it's very prominent in my mind right now. But at the time when I was president, the association was 10 years old. I started in 1976. That's a hallmark year, isn't it? And the hallmarks of the association were in place. These wonderful people had worked and worked to establish the credentials, the training. So now we were reaching out for government agencies and educational agencies' recognition of this wonderful new profession that was taking over the world. So, as I started to talk about this, we put in a fundamental GAC, which then later became the GAC committee on the board. And with the cooperation of American Art Therapy Association, we hired our first lobbyist in 1977, I think. And I want to congratulate the board because I understand they reinstated a lobbyist. You can't understand, it sounds very esoteric, but I'll give you a couple of anecdotes about what a lobbyist can do. There was a bill, Public Law 94-142, and the highlights were already done that was being marked up. And so our lobbyist said, we have to go and make comments. So we had papers of comments. These are a representation of comments that other organizations had put in. So my lobbyist takes me around Capitol Hill, all the various places. I had no idea where I was. He takes me to the right office. We go in and we say, we are here to present comments. And they say, ta-da. And he said, we will wait. So we sat down and we waited for the LA to come out. And I sat patiently. Then the LA came in 30 minutes later. And I like to describe it like being Olympia in the Tales of Hoffman, that my lobbyist would pull my string out. Hi, I'm Judith Bunney. I'm representing the American Dance Therapy Association, and we are important, and you have to include us in this. So, it's really important to make a personal presentation. We did not stack our comments on a table with 2 feet high, other comments. And guess what? We got written in. We got written in as special service, related services into the education of all handicapped. So some of you may have benefited from this escapade to have a job working with handicapped children. The next big thing we did, oh, no, that's ahead. That's ahead. We did, in '78, we wrote up the first civil service classifications for creative arts therapists, GS 638. Those of you who work in the federal government, in VA or military hospitals or organizations, educational organizations, you have a job that was non-existent before that time. I mentioned Marian Chace did not have a job classification as a dance therapist. She was a rec therapist until we had 638. She was not working at that. She had also to retire at 70. So then this is important. The lobbyists find out all these things that are happening, and they let you know. There's a focus sometimes on the arts, there's sometimes a focus on the health, sometimes on mental health, so you have to know how you fit in and where you can make an impact. So our lobbyist says, wow, they're forming in the White House a plum job for Rosalind Carter. She's going to be heading up the President's Commission for Mental Health. And the first open hearing is in Philadelphia. Let's get up there and make a splash. Okay, so again, I'm cleaning my Santa Fe house, and we found this old tattered, I guess it's the Philadelphia Inquirer. Anyway, so we got there, and it's the first hearing. Everybody's very excited. The room is packed, and they're selecting our cards for who is to speak. And the gentleman that was selecting the cards was smoking a pipe. This is the 70s. People were smoking. Okay, so I went up and I kind of reflected his position, not really mimicking, but kind of joining him, and our card was chosen fourth. It works. So Rebecca Bennett is behind me. I was testifying for both art and dance therapy. And those of you that have testified, you know there's a green light, an orange light, and a red light. Okay, so you can talk until the red light goes on, and that's it. So I just blah, 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 and I was going over time, and Rosalind Carter said, no, let Miss Bunney finish. She was so naive. It was her first hearing. Be there first. So I was allowed to finish. The red light was on. Yikes! Okay, so at the break, she was really fascinated, and that's what this article talks about, that it mentions my name, that she called us over at the break, and she said, tell me about this dance therapy, art therapy, because though she had been working with NAMI for many years in Georgia, she was new to some of the essence of the new treatments. So, okay, so we got an appointment. I ended up on the role of the arts panel for the President's Commission, which, you know, President's Commissions write these things, and it's just a splash. Not much happens. Not much funding came out of that. But the next important thing is the establishment of ADTA. And this was from a grant from the American Psychiatric Association. We pulled together all the presidents of all the creative arts therapy associations. There were 5 associations at that time. And when you're lobbying, you go in, and even if they pull your string and you say your piece, you're only speaking for 2,000 or 3,000 people. And ADTA, 10,000 people. Now we were going to be a little bit stronger and more prominent. So we formed the National Creative Arts Coalition of Creative Arts Therapy Associations in what does that say, 79. So, you know, all these things take a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. I do want to mention that state licensure was also in that period. The first one, I believe, was in Wisconsin. Yes. And so you work in your own jurisdictions. New York and New Jersey has been working on this for many, many years. You need numbers. And the other thing you need to know is who your representatives, who your senators are. How many of you know them by name? And do they know you when you go in to work for them and knock doors for them? And it's really, really effective. But you have to have the connections. And if you have a lobbyist that can anticipate what the next event is coming up, that has a big help. Okay, the last thing is the power of movement. Mimi and I were at, many of us were friends with Dr. Burton Brown, who was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health. He was also a musician. He was very supportive of our efforts. And he convinced the Rockefeller Foundation to hold a forum of granting organizations like Johnson & Johnson, ARCO. There were about 10 or 12 of them at this big, beautiful table. And we presented the film, Looking for Me. And, okay, this is good. And they said, oh, so you work with children. They weren't going to fund children. Okay. That's the other thing you need to know about granting organizations, is when their period of grants expires, because they have to give away some of that money before the end of that period. And you have to know whether they're focused on the arts, or whether they're focused on mental health, or whether they're focused on the good life, whatever. So we decided at that time, we went, I think, for drinks at the Harvard Club, if I remember, Mimi, with Bertram Brown, and we decided we needed a film showing the breadth of treatments that dance therapy provided. And that's how we came up with the format for the Power of Movement. As you remember, we had various populations, and it's been very successful in showing novices what the effectiveness of this therapy is. And I have to say, my heart goes out because Christopher Reeve narrated that film, and there's a wonderful documentary about his life now. He really was Superman. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Susan Kleiman, who will be speaking about advocacy.
I think I'm the last one to speak about these kinds of issues. I found that advocacy, when I became president, was kind of forced into stepping forward and speaking up. And so I want to encourage everyone to build on the premise of building bridges, relationships with like-minded people as well as unlike-minded people, so that we can speak up and build a reputation and express ourselves in broader ways. That picture is from a National Eating Disorder Association walk. And I do a lot of those kinds of things because they're important to people. And it's important to us, I think, to speak up and to offer what we have that is so important. So these are two of the concepts I called advocacy tips: building bridges and collaborating. And let's turn to the next slide. So we created this, we had an opportunity. I like to build opportunities from what seems like nothing. I read in the newspaper that an organization had a hearing in the U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging. So I explored that opportunity, and our board explored it, and we met with the American Art Therapy Association and joined forces with them. We hired their legislative consultant, and we created this wonderful hearing. We had to learn new ways to express ourselves. We had to interest the Senate in wanting to have a hearing. We did things like we sent Mimi to a Grateful Dead concert because one of the staffers was enamored of Mickey Hart. And we hired a coach to work with us on speaking up and speaking in a proper way to the people in the legislative world. And we had Judith Bunney, who spoke, was our representative speaking before the Senate Special Committee on Aging in that huge room they have where they have their biggest events. And we were told we had to have celebrities involved in order to interest the Senate on listening to us. And we sent Elissa and Miriam, and I think Mimi, you may have gone with them too, on the train to pick up Sandman Sims, who danced before the Senate, and then we had to get him off because he loved to entertain. And we had a party in the Senate. We involved all kinds of people. We had to dress in certain ways where we could fit in no dangly earrings. We had to present ourselves in certain ways, and from that came opportunities. Before that, that's Jack Palance doing his one-armed push-up. The art therapists were able to get him to come. And part of the deal was that we had to get his girlfriend's mother, who was in her 70s and who had a leg above her head. We had to get her also because that was part of the conditions. And so she walked down the aisle, and then she got on a table, I believe, and lifted her leg. But we also, what happened from this was opportunities. Like, would you turn on to these hearing opportunities were, well, first of all, look at us up there. I had a migraine all day. It never went away. And there's Judith and Sharon and I trying to gain control again at the end of the day. But Sarah Campbell Arnett, who was our public relations person, this is what she reported. Listen carefully. For the first time, we hired a professional marketing agent to do the PR. We had coverage from CNN, NPR, CBS, NBC, and the AP. Wow. There were articles in 100 newspapers. Among others, ADTA was featured in the Physical Therapy Bulletin, the APA Weekly News, and on Entertainment Tonight, we danced. Following the hearing, DMT was included in 4 sections of the Older Americans Act. And although there were problems afterwards, it was gutted, we still, it's part of the record. And several research opportunities emerged. These were so important. We worked with Darcy Loveland, who was the art therapy consultant we got involved with, and the alternative therapies. We got 2 grants, I believe. Dr. Sherry Goodall got a grant. ADTA got a humongous grant. You can read about it in the journal. Opportunities emerged. We had created a voice. I hope some of this will continue. This was a lot of work, but there was a lot of joy, and there's a lot that came from this kind of experience. People came from around the country. Dance movement therapists came from around the country, from different places, created a display. And this was before they had the advocacy days in Washington. It was kind of a precursor for that. We also did an experience. We danced in the Senate, and we had 3 dance therapists that we chose to lead the dance experience. Those 3 dance movement therapists are still here today, and they're still dancing. And they were Mimi Berger, Elissa White, and Sharon Shanklin.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, Elissa, Sharon, and I led the movement after the hearing 40 years ago for the senators and their staff. And so Sharon and then Elissa will first lead all of you, and then turn it over to one of the next generation, Tricia Capello. And I'll end with a special ritual that I've done as a greeting, but we'll do it as an ending from Isadora Duncan. And then please stay, because then we will have a question and answer period to hear from you. So now...
Sharon, can I just say one thing, Sharon, before you start, so that I just want to flash this, because I think the movement will be our last moment. We put together some ideas about moving into the future. So if you just take a look. So just before we move, the issues to focus on from our perspective, the dance and dance therapy, marketing our work, research, publishing in journals, educational opportunities, and keeping updated on local and national legislation. I think that that's what a lot of people here have said, and just a way to summarize. And now we won't do some moving. Sharon.
Before I start, I just want to make a comment aside from this. Other than that Joe Chabra will not be here, I think it is a mighty miracle that all of us are still alive and here. What we did for the senators, and now we're going to do it, continue on for you too. So keep standing and just take a deep breath, and then stretch yourselves out. And this was a minor miracle. They said they never experienced such a thing in the Senate before.
Again. I usually do this as a greeting, as an opening. It was a ritual that Isadora Duncan, who you all know, did before every class. And I think we wanted to do it as an ending day, so it will be a beginning for you. You will all be pioneers in dance therapy. As I think you saw we were. So, if somebody could hold this, just follow along with me. Connect to yourself. I gotta catch my breath. Breathe. Feel yourself breathing. Feel your heart. Thank you. Connect to the sky and the universe and the ceiling. Connect to the horizon. Stretch out. Yes, all the way around. Thank you. Thank you. And from there, connect to the earth, the energy of the earth, and lift up. And connect to other people, every one of you. And then very importantly, from connecting to other people, connect back to yourself. Thank you all. Now questions and answers.
I also want to thank you all for not only your work leading up to this, but also to take the time and energy to share all of this with us, because I know it's a lot. And something that struck me when I was watching and listening is the work. And right now, something that I've at least heard in the community of dance movement therapists is at times a lot of feelings of like separation and burnout, basically. And I'm curious if you have any tips and tricks, because clearly there has to be something that has allowed the formation of this organization in being able to sustain for as long as it has. So anything that you want to share? Yeah.
Thank you for asking me. There is a theory called social capital, which I forgot the name, Professor Robert. Robert. Oh, am I closer? I can't breathe. Anyway, there's a theory called social capital, which has to do with shared values. And I think that those of us who started the organization certainly had a lot of shared values. I mean, you can kind of guess what they are, but with the ensuing years, what has happened, especially with the internet, is that seems to have fallen apart. People don't connect with each other. And so I just wanted to throw that in because I think it's really important to think about in terms of your values and in terms of how that doesn't seem to exist the way we did, up to a million years ago. That's all.
Also, I just want to say that we had passion. We really had passion about the work and what we were doing. And therefore, even though it was hard work and we spent many hours, it was so important to us that we just kept going.
I'd like to add that it was work and play, because as Winnicott talked about, work can be play, and if it's passionate, as it was for all of us, and we suggest that you find colleagues to do it with, because nobody wanted to let each other down. Even in this panel, we've been working all summer on trying to figure out how to present this material. And it's been a memory for what we did originally together, where we weren't going to stop until we got something that we could feel good about. And it was both hard work and play.
we've had a lot of, it's similar to what happens in a family, where there's a connection and there's a disconnection and then the children leave, if there are children, or the parents split. Eventually you come back together, and we've all split at some point because we're all human beings and we get angry and we get rageful. However, there is a great love between us all that has permeated because we're aware of how many years we've been together. And that is very, very precious, and it's very rare. So coming back together, 60 years is a long time for many of us. I mean, some of you are saying 60, what does that even mean? I mean, the number is, but, so what happens is, yes, there's gonna be horrible times, when you're gonna walk away screaming and yelling, but can we use our skills as therapists, maybe, to do something, to come together, to release, to let go, to communicate in a way that's healing and connecting, and that's what I think, ultimately that's what we've done. But it doesn't mean we haven't had hard times. It's unrealistic to think that you wouldn't. But the fact that we're together now is right. We all are very aware it's very precious.
I think also the creative process and building something with other people is so important. And then it becomes part of the family. Sometimes you get along and sometimes you don't. But you're still building something and working through it. And you have others who want to do that with you. So that kind of has to start at the base, I think, of leadership, and also has to be felt by the community, so that everyone has to, or as many as possible, have to feel a part of that community and want to give to it and want to have something grow that's special, that you feel passionate about, and that continues on.
I want to say something. If you look at these incredible women, each one of them is still working. They are working women into their whatever decade they're in, which is a lot. There are a lot, but there are a lot of years cumulative for all of these 7 women. And it's their love, it's their passion, it's their life. And they have spent their life doing this work, and they continue to do this work. And they have a lot to say, as you found out today, and a lot of wisdom to still impart. So I invite you to take them up on the opportunity of speaking to them, getting to hear what their wisdom continues to be, because they are extraordinary and they're models. And working with them for the last lots of months, since January, I'm only in my 7th decade. And when I'm in my 9th decade, I want to be them.
I was past presidents of the meeting with Angela to do whatever she needed, wanted, whatever. And in talking to her, she said something about history of ADTA not being taught in schools, which kind of prompted all of this. Because whether we like to believe it or not, history is really important. Yeah. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
There's a question over there.
I do have a question, and that is, I heard the name Mary Wigman spoken again and again. How many of you studied with someone who studied with Mary Wigman? How many of you studied with someone who studied with Mary Wigman?
Mary Wigman. Oh.
Wow.
Yep.
Yes, that's what I thought I heard.
My first teacher. That's wow. Worked with Adolf Baum, who worked with Kurt Hughes, who worked in Love and Walk with me.
Right. So I got, because Norma Canner is often forgotten as a pioneer. And I know she wasn't in the first generation, but she studied with Barbara Mettler, who very strongly stated that she was not a dance therapist. However, Norma took what she learned from Barbara, which was from Mary Wigman, and that's what she passed. Yeah, I saw it as You went flying by.
I'm actually going to show you the rest of these slides that I didn't show. That were. I thought that we wouldn't have enough time. And this is a list of past presidents. Claire was the first chairperson before Marian became the first president. So this is a list of presidents past. Take a minute to look at it. And the next group of slides, we realize that there are many dance therapists who are no longer with us, whose significant work touched our lives and enriched the field. And we wanted to acknowledge them. And I'm glad that you're sitting here, probably a little bit over time, to continue to watch. There are a couple of people whose photos I didn't have, but their names are up there. These 4 were past presidents who have passed. If there's anybody who we've forgotten, we are sorry. You can feel free to call out their names if there are significant people in your lives who touched you in terms of you being your mentors, your teacher. You're welcome.
Barbara Harrison.
Call out names. Barbara Harrison.
Kathy Pastor. Kathy Pastor.
Kathy Pasternak.
Kathy Pasternak.
Kathy Pasternak.
She's still alive.
Pamela Fairweather. Millie Hill. Peter Madden. Hector Munoz. Yes. Munoz. Alice Taylor and Billy Logan. Judith Schwartz. Arlene Value. Nancy Harold Marshall. Penny Lewis was up there. Elaine Siegel was up there.
Lucy Beinhorn.
Lucy Beinhorn. Marian North. Jane Gavin Siegel was there. If there are names that you remember, just say them to somebody during the next couple of days so that you get their names out there in the cosmos. If there aren't any other questions, we thank you. I feel very emotional about this. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. These history makers, history holders have given you a gift, and they've given me a gift. So we thank them. We thank you for sitting here for all these hours. Take a photo.